Welcome to the story. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and support me. The rain fell softly against the stone walls of the old tower, a rhythmic tapping that seemed to echo the heartbeat of the man within. Arcas sat in the center of his crumbling domain, his long fingers tracing invisible lines in the air as magic rippled through the room. Time bent around him like a fluid mist, malleable and unstable, waiting for his command. But as always, the moment slipped through his grasp like sand in an hourglass that he clenched his fists in frustration, the familiar weight of failure pressing down on him once more. No matter how many times he tried, no matter how far back he reached, he could not save her. Elara was gone. And time, it seemed, was a cruel and unrelenting force, indifferent to the suffering it left in its wake. Arcas had been the most revered mage of his era, his mastery over time magic unrivaled. Yet now, he was but a ghost of the man he had once been, consumed by grief and madness. His once gleaming tower now lay in ruins, surrounded by the chaotic remnants of his attempts to alter the past. Shadows of the past flickered in and out of existence, fragments of moments long lost, distorted by his reckless tampering. He had broken the laws of magic, and in doing so, had fractured the very fabric of time, but none of that mattered to Arcas. The world could crumble, time itself could collapse, but if he could bring her back, just for one more moment, he would pay any price. The door to the tower creaked open, and Arcas didn't even look up as a gust of wind swept through the room. He knew who it was. The ghost of Elara appeared before him, as she had countless times before, her face twisted in the agony of her final moments. Her lips moved soundlessly, repeating the same words over and over, but Arcas couldn't hear them. He never could. And in the end, the memory always shattered, leaving him alone with his failure. He stood slowly, the weight of his years evident in every movement. His once golden hair was streaked with gray, and his eyes, once sharp and full of purpose, were dull and hollow. "I'll try again," he whispered to himself, though there was no one to hear him. "I will save you." Outside, the world shifted. Far from the crumbling tower, a group of 4 young adventurers sat around a campfire, the light flickering against the tall trees that surrounded them. The night was quiet, save for the occasional rustle of leaves or crackle of the fire. Lena, the leader of the group, poked at the embers with a stick, her sharp green eyes scanning the darkness. "Ezra, tell me again why we're out here chasing ghost stories," she asked, her voice a mix of impatience and amusement. Ezra, a wiry rogue with a perpetual smirk, shrugged. "Because, my dear Lena, ghost stories are the best kind. Plus, there's gold in it for us. Rumor has it there's a time mage in that old tower up north who's causing all sorts of trouble. If we fix his mess, we get paid. Simple as that." Kara, the quiet healer of the group, glanced up from her spellbook. "Time magic is dangerous. If the rumors are true, this isn't just some simple job. The very fabric of reality could be at stake." "Exactly," Ezra replied with a grin. "High stakes, high rewards." Lena rolled her eyes. "You're hopeless." She turned to Draven, the youngest of the group, a brooding mage in training who had been unusually silent. "What about you? You've been quiet all day." Draven's dark eyes flickered with something Lena couldn't quite place, curiosity, perhaps, or something more dangerous. If the mage is truly manipulating time, it could be a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to study the craft. Time magic is forbidden for a reason, but if it could be controlled, it can't, Kara interrupted, her voice firm. Time is too powerful, too unstable. No one should have that kind of control. Maybe, Draven muttered, but Lena could see the spark of intrigue in his gaze. Time magic had always fascinated him, and the chance to witness it firsthand was something he couldn't resist. The next morning, they set out for the tower, the path winding through dense forests and over craggy hills. As they drew closer, the air around them began to feel wrong. Strange, fleeting images flickered at the edges of their vision, brief glimpses of people, places, and moments that didn't belong. Kara was the first to notice. "Do you see that?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. A young girl, dressed in old-fashioned clothes, ran past them, laughing as if playing a game. But when they turned to look, she was gone. Lena nodded. "Yeah. We need to be careful. The closer we get to the tower, the worse it'll be." Ezra kept his hand on the hilt of his dagger, his usual carefree demeanor replaced by wariness. "Feels like we're walking through a dream," he muttered. "A nightmare, more like," Draven added, though there was a strange excitement in his voice. By the time they reached the tower, the air was thick with temporal anomalies. Fragments of time, people, animals, even landscapes, flashed in and out of existence around them, as if the past and future were bleeding into the present. The tower itself was in worse condition than they had imagined, its once grand stone walls now crumbled and overgrown, the windows shattered, and the doors hanging off their hinges. Lena drew her sword, motioning for the others to follow her inside. "Stay sharp," she warned. "We don't know what we're dealing with yet." Inside, the tower was even more chaotic. The walls were lined with ancient books and scrolls, but many of them were burnt or torn apart, as if in a fit of rage. Strange symbols were carved into the floor, glowing faintly with residual magic. And at the center of the room, a large hourglass stood, its sand frozen mid-fall. Draven approached it, his fingers twitching with the urge to touch the hourglass. "This is incredible," he whispered. "The amount of power it must have taken to freeze time like this." Kara pulled him back. "Don't," she warned. "You have no idea what you're dealing with." But before they could argue further, a voice echoed through the room. "You shouldn't have come here." The adventurers spun around to see Arcus standing at the top of a winding staircase, his eyes burning with an intensity that made Lena's blood run cold. He looked older than they had imagined, his face lined with grief and exhaustion, but there was a dangerous edge to him, a madness that simmered just beneath the surface. "You've come to stop me, haven't you?" Arcus continued, his voice soft but filled with menace. "But you don't understand. I'm not trying to destroy time, I'm trying to fix it." Lena tightened her grip on her sword. "You're tearing reality apart," she said. "If you don't stop, there won't be anything left to fix." Arcus laughed, a sound that sent a shiver down their spines. "You think I care about reality? I care about her. Elara. My wife. I will save her, no matter the cost." Draven stepped forward, his voice hesitant but filled with curiosity. "You can't change the past," he said. "But maybe there's another way. A way to bring her back without destroying everything." Arcus' eyes flickered with interest, but it was quickly replaced by anger. "Another way? There is no other way. I've tried everything, and I will not stop until I have her back." The room began to tremble as Arcus raised his hands, time warping and twisting around him. The adventurers braced themselves as the tower filled with the sound of cracking stone and rushing wind. "Enough!" Lena shouted, charging at Arcus with her sword raised. But before she could reach him, a blast of magic sent her flying across the room. Ezra threw a dagger, but it was deflected by a shield of shimmering light. Kara tried to cast a protective spell, but the chaotic energy in the room made it impossible to focus. Draven, however, remained calm. He could feel the pull of time magic, the way it flowed and ebbed like a river. He could sense the power that Arcus wielded, but also the cracks in his control. If he could just reach him, if he could make him understand, Arcus, Draven called out, his voice cutting through the chaos. You've lost her. I know what that feels like. But this isn't the way to bring her back. Arcus hesitated for the briefest moment, his gaze locking with Draven's. What do you know of loss? He spat. I know enough, Draven replied. And I know that you can't change the past. But you can still define the future. The room stilled, the weight of Draven's words hanging in the air. Arcus looked around at the destruction he had caused, the crumbling tower, the flickering images of a shattered timeline, and for the first time, he seemed to realize the cost of his actions. I can't. Arcus whispered, his voice breaking. I can't let her go. Draven stepped forward, slowly lowering his hands. You don't have to let her go. But you have to accept that she's gone. You can't change the past, but you can choose how to move forward. Tears filled Arcus' eyes as he collapsed to his knees, the weight of his grief finally too much to bear. The magic around them began to fade, the anomalies disappearing one by one as the timeline stabilized. Lena slowly got to her feet, wincing in pain but relieved to see the chaos subsiding. Is it over? She asked. Draven nodded. It's over. Arcus looked up at them, his face pale and drawn. What have I done? He whispered. You've made mistakes, Kara said gently. But it's not too late to fix them. You can still find peace. Arcus nodded slowly, his gaze distant. I'll never see her again, will I? Draven shook his head. No. But you can honor her memory by living, by finding a way to move forward, without breaking time. The old mage sighed, a deep, shuddering breath, and the last remnants of his magic faded away. The tower, once filled with the hum of temporal energy, was now quiet and still. The adventurers left the tower at dawn, the air fresh and clear. For the first time in what felt like forever, the world seemed stable, the echoes of the past no longer haunting them. As they walked away, Draven glanced back at the tower one last time. Do you think he'll be okay? Ezra asked, his usual smirk replaced by genuine concern. I hope so, Draven replied. But even if he's not, at least he won't destroy the world trying to change the past. Lena sheathed her sword, a small smile on her lips. Sometimes, that's all we can ask for. The road ahead was long, but they walked it with the knowledge that while the past couldn't be changed, the future was still theirs to shape. And in that, they found hope. The road stretched endlessly ahead of them, the morning mist clinging to the trees and the sky still tinged with the pale hues of dawn. The adventurers walked in silence, each lost in their thoughts, the weight of what had happened back at the tower settling heavily upon them. The encounter with Arcus had shaken them in ways they hadn't expected, and though they had succeeded in stopping the destruction of time, the victory felt bittersweet. Draven trailed behind the others, his mind racing with the memory of Arcus' broken expression, the pain etched into every line of his face. There was a part of him that couldn't help but feel a deep sympathy for the old mage, a man who had once been so powerful and revered, reduced to nothing by the loss of someone he loved. Draven's fascination with time magic had once blinded him to the dangers of such power, but now, having seen the devastation it caused, he understood why it was forbidden. The temptation to rewrite the past, to undo the mistakes and tragedies of life, was too great, and in the end, it led only to ruin. Lena walked ahead, her stride purposeful despite the exhaustion that tugged at her muscles. She had always been the leader, the one who kept them on track, but even she had felt the pull of doubt back at the tower. Arcus' words had struck a chord with her, reminding her of her own losses, her family, her home, things she had long buried beneath her sense of duty. But unlike Arcus, she had made peace with those losses. They were part of her story, part of what made her who she was. And in the end, she had chosen to move forward, not backward. Ezra, ever the rogue, was uncharacteristically quiet. Normally, he would have been making some quip or joke to lighten the mood, but even he seemed to be weighed down by the gravity of what they had faced. He had seen the flickers of alternate realities, the glimpses of futures where they had failed, and it unnerved him in a way that few things did. For once, his quick wit had no answer to the chaos they had witnessed. Kara, always the calm presence in their group, walked with a steady, measured pace, her hands folded in front of her. She had been the one to heal their wounds after the battle with Arcus, and yet, there were some wounds even she couldn't mend. The pain of loss, the burden of grief, those were things that no spell could ever heal. She knew that all too well, and as much as she wished she could ease the suffering of those around her, she understood that some battles had to be fought within. The day wore on, and by the time the sun had climbed high in the sky, the adventurers found themselves at the edge of a small village nestled in a valley. It was a quiet, peaceful place, a stark contrast to the chaos they had just left behind. The sight of it brought a sense of relief, as if the simple act of returning to normalcy could help them shake off the lingering weight of the past. Lena glanced back at the others. "We should rest here for the night," she said, her voice firm but kind. "We've been through a lot, and we need to regroup before we head back." No one argued. They were all too tired, physically and emotionally, to put up any resistance. The village inn was a modest place, but it was warm and welcoming, and after securing rooms, they gathered around a table in the common room to eat and share a quiet moment of reflection. Ezra leaned back in his chair, letting out a long sigh. "Well, that was a fun little adventure, wasn't it?" he said, his tone light but lacking its usual humor. Kara smiled softly. "We did what we had to do. Arcus, he needed to be stopped, for his sake as much as for ours." Draven, who had been staring into his mug, finally spoke. "Do you think he'll be okay? Arcus, I mean." There was a pause, and Lena looked thoughtful. "I don't know. I hope so. But losing someone you love, it changes you. We can only hope that he finds a way to live with it, instead of trying to rewrite it." Draven nodded slowly, his thoughts still clouded by the memory of Arcus' anguished face. "I wonder if we had the power to change the past, would any of us be able to resist using it?" Lena shook her head. "No. I don't think anyone could. That's why that kind of power is too dangerous. It's not about strength or skill. It's about accepting that there are things we can't change, no matter how much we want to." The room fell into a contemplative silence. Each of them had their own scars, their own regrets. But they had all made the choice to move forward, to live with those scars rather than trying to erase them. Eventually, the group retired to their rooms for the night, and the inn fell quiet. Draven lay awake in his bed, staring at the ceiling, his mind still racing. Time magic had always fascinated him, its potential, its mystery, but now he saw the other side of it. The madness it could bring, the desperation it could fuel. He had been so close to falling into that same trap, lured by the promise of control over something as elusive as time, but control was an illusion. Time wasn't meant to be controlled. It was meant to be lived. The next morning, the adventurers set out once more, the village fading into the distance behind them. The road ahead was long, but the path felt lighter now. They had faced a great challenge and come out the other side not unscathed, but stronger for it. The future stretched out before them, uncertain but full of possibility. As they walked, Draven found himself reflecting on the lessons he had learned. Magic was a powerful force, but it was not infallible. There were limits to what it could do, and those limits were there for a reason. He had always believed that power was the answer to everything, that with enough knowledge and skill, anything was possible. But now, he understood that some things were beyond even the greatest magic. The past was one of those things. It couldn't be changed, no matter how much anyone wished it could be. But the future was still theirs to shape. The group traveled for several more days, the landscape changing as they moved from forested valleys to rolling hills and wide-open plains. They passed through small villages and bustling towns, each stop a brief respite before they continued on their journey. It wasn't until they reached the gates of a large city, their final destination, that they truly began to feel the weight of their journey lifting. The city was alive with activity, merchants hawking their wares, children running through the streets, the sounds of life filling the air. Lena turned to the others, a smile tugging at the corners of her lips. "We made it," she said, her voice filled with quiet pride. "We did what we set out to do." Ezra grinned. "And we didn't even get killed in the process. I'd call that a win." Kara chuckled softly. "I think we all earned a bit of rest after this." Draven nodded in agreement, though his thoughts were already turning to what lay ahead. The journey had changed him, in ways he hadn't fully realized yet. He no longer felt the same burning need to master time magic, to control forces beyond his understanding. Instead, he found himself looking forward to the challenges that would come in the future, challenges that he would face without trying to change what had already been. As they stepped through the gates of the city, the sun setting behind them, casting long shadows across the streets, they knew that their adventure was far from over. But for now, they had found peace in the knowledge that some things were meant to be left in the past, and the future, uncertain though it may be, was where they would find their strength. And with that, they walked into the heart of the city, ready for whatever lay ahead.